Greetings, friends and comrades. This is Pilleater, and I am recording this on November the 15th. And in the last few days, from November 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th, I was attending American Renaissance in Nashville, Tennessee. American Renaissance 2021. This was my second attendance, and my first attendance was back in 2017. Uh, kind of post pandemic, and after studying and all that academic stuff, I decided to attend my second time at American Renaissance and check up on the scene. It was very successful, very interesting, and a breath of new fresh air. And I thought I would just record and give a brief report on what I witnessed at amren and where the scene is going from here. So, accordingly, the 2021 American Renaissance Conference was titled The Decisive Decade. And the tagline going by, Its enemy is us and our culture. I bought my tickets back in May. I flew from Philly to Nashville and then Nashville back to Philly. I stayed at a hotel on Thursday night and got at the conference at 2 or 3 o'clock. I love Nashville. Nashville's a great city, and just coming back to it, I spending my time in the hotel room. I have to look at a picture of Ernest or that guy Jim Verne. I guess that's a manifestation of Nashville culture. But as I was taking the Uber there to the conference hall, my Uber driver in that 40-minute time, he was a complete anti-masker, anti-vaxxer. Totally believes the Clintons pre-plans the whole COVID thing, and he was kind of red pilled on that. And I told him, you should have joined American Renaissance instead of being a Uber driver. And weird at this amren, when I came to the park for the first time, I was stopped by two rangers. They just wanted to know my name. I gave them my name. They made sure I was in the park, and then tight security, checked my bags, all that, patted me down, let me in. It was all good. I love the park. I love the lodge. It's a very beautiful place. Uh, Before I checked into my room, which you can check in on that Friday day early, I decided to check more in at 5, scheduled. I met some really good people. I will not say their names. Older people. One guy was from Germany. The other guy was a vet, remembering the old days of NPI. We talked about the difference between Vietnamese, Koreans, and Chinese for a bit in that living room space. I also came across Jew Among You, who I haven't seen in forever. And yeah, I didn't realize he was a common visitor to American Renaissance. And I remember coming across him 4 years ago, and a very professional man, kind of the first face I saw. But even more strange is a guy named, and I'm trying to remember his name, but I mean, his name was Dave, yes. And I've seen him 4 years ago too. And originally I began my talk that 4 years ago about Robert Stark and the Voice of Reason radio broadcast. And he was a veteran to remember that scene. He was talking to a friend, and I approached him being, I remember you. He doesn't have a presence on the internet, and I don't know if he comments post, but just like Jew Among You, Dave is a frequent visitor, and it's nice to see him. So, I mean, I wish he had an alt account. I could talk to him, but already Gus going into the venue, I already was greeted by very familiar faces as well. Some other guys who I made their contacts, I am now kind of forgetting about, but we had those kind of small talk chats. I registered at 5 o'clock. I checked into my hotel. The 5 o'clock or the Friday event is very underlooked, but very also important. And if I was to go to amren again, I would suggest going as soon as possible, like at noon on Friday, because many people get in there, and you're just socializing for that 7 hours. And at 5 o'clock in that bigger room, wine is given, cheese and crackers, all that good food. And hmm, Yeah, the other good faces. I mean, Jared then speaks at 7 o'clock and just for 15 minutes. Thank you all for coming. Tomorrow's the big day. It will start 9 o'clock sharp. All that, but Friday night also has its charm. I was able to meet Mark Weber again of Institute Historical Review. Then my friend Tiger Jin showed up, and that's my first time meeting Tiger Jin in person. Tiger Jin's a great guy, and I was able to have the talk to him. Also, I talked to other more younger Republican types, quote unquote, younger Republican. Maybe they're young white gnats, but I don't know. I just say that maybe groypers is the correct term. Um, I went to bed Friday night around midnight too, and took a nice shower, nice living room, all that. So maybe I should just, instead of talking about my experience, get to Saturday. What was Saturday, the main day about? Exactly at 9. I got up at 7 o'clock, put on my suit and tie. You always have to wear a suit and tie and event to these things. And I had breakfast with a group, very friendly guys, very group. And I was happening to sit to a classic countercurrents individual, and he was a speaker there in the New York Forum. And it was nice to accidentally butt into him. And he suggested, for work opportunities here and there. And the food at the lodge is all just Nashville food, grits, chicken, biscuits, all that good stuff. And sharply at 9 o'clock began F. Roger Devlin on Envy. And I thought he was going to talk about Rene Girard, but instead he was talking about a German academic type. And I really liked it. And it was my first, speech just sitting down and hearing. And I definitely want to hear it again once it's uploaded online. Very informative about desire and being jealous and asking for that. Some other events happened. Maybe I should just go over every speaker then thinking about. So Devlin is always nice to see that. Oh, so in the main venue, there was a few book tables, and those book tables were Antelope Press, a friend selling countercurrent books, but there was no Greg Johnson or any countercurrent representatives. It was more like a hodgepodge of Arctos books, countercurrent books. I wouldn't exactly call it countercurrents books, but importantly, it was there because F. Roger Devlin's Sexual Utopian Power is there. Gregory Hood's book, Waking Up from the American Dream, was being sold as well. So it wasn't exactly the countercurrents table because countercurrents did not, or Greg Johnson did not have a presence at amren. There was another table about White Arts Collective. Donald Kent's art was being sold, and the magazine. The American Freedom Party has a presence. Whatchamacallit, VDare. VDare has a lot of good books. I was about to buy Michael Hart's book, but they had Restoring America. They didn't have Michael Hart's second book. There's a man who looks like a classical musician, and I always forget his name. And he's a very frequent guy, and he sells Edward Dutton books. William Simpson Gailey's Which Way, Western Man, all that. I mean, that was the table to the far right of the room, and it was all like classic newspapers like American Free Press and all that. But from those tables, Antelope Press and White Arts Collective was the most popular, and the one young kid selling quote unquote countercurrents books, that was just more for F. Roger Devlin and the having available Gregory Hood's book. Now I'll get to that in a bit about the popular presence. But during that, looking at books, I've actually bought one book from Antelope Press, and that was The Charm of Egypt. And I got that book, and I'm supposed to read The Charm of Egypt soon, so I'll look into that as well. It's a really interesting read, by the way, very esoteric. It reminds me of that Amiga game, Total Eclipse. But anyway, for the second speaker, there was what happened was there was no Dave Cole or Colin Flattery. It wasn't because they bailed out and didn't want to show up. David Cole is sick, and so is Colin Flattery. It was just totally coincidental. So both David Cole and Colin Flattery's speeches were replaced last minute with a debate and by a friend of Colin Flattery who does music. That was later on the day, but after Devlin, it was Peter Brimlow, and Peter Brimlow gives his classic kind of snarky, facetious speeches about the what's to expect next year. And I do love his very cartoony kind of comical. There was one part in his speech where he was talking about a dystopian novel, and that was The Lord of the Rings. And it caught me off surprise. It was like, oh, a dystopian novel, The Lord of the Rings. I was reading into it. During Q&A, someone came up and said, do you actually mean the Lord of the Worlds or Lord of the Wars? And I was a little fooled for a bit because I thought that typo was Lord of the Rings. So I'll listen to Brimlow's speech again and find that infamous Lord of the Rings speech that he said. Afterward was Michelle Malkin. And Michelle Malkin, I thought, would have been the keynote speaker, but she went pretty early. I'm unaware of Malkin's activity. I hear her name a lot. And she kind of has that presence here, which Gregory Hood tried to get in Peter Thiel as a speaker here. But Malkin was once worked for that PragerU Conservative Inc., and now she's talking about open borders and all that. But what I really enjoyed about her, Malkin, her being like Filipino American, is that she says her racial awakening was when whites and Asians are against the evil black immigrant thugs. And I just thought that was this kind of Eurasian unity there. And I think that was really funny. I'll have to look at the speech again, but Malkin definitely got across this Eurasian diversity, a person of color white nationalist in the room. So I liked that. Again, followed by more coffee breaks, if I remember correctly. So, instead of Colin Flattery, what happened was one of his friends showed up who does songs on his podcast about kind of racial crimes and statistics and showing clips of blacks hurting white people. I didn't find it funny. I thought it was very amusing and sad in a weird way, but he kind of got the message across. Again, David Cole was replaced by a debate between two-team debate. One team was Jared Taylor and Gregory Hood, and Sam Dixon, I believe Chris Roberts, I think. They were debating between pro-Trump, anti-Trump, activism, pro-politics, ethno-state, non-ethno-state, kind of going back and forth. And I thought that was very informative. I mean, I remember some time ago there was a debate between Spencer and Derbyshire for the ethno-state for not. And that's kind of a nostalgic throwback between that one 6 years ago. Dinner's great. Nice steak, whatever. More talking, more connections. Great people. I would shout their names, but I kind of, they're all in the chat or somehow or reason, but great connections, by the way. The banquet, nice dinner, nice all that. Was talking. We got more into the esoteric Avolian discussion, but Gregory Hood made a fiery speech. It was really more, and there was something so passionate about Gregory Hood where I thought he was going to, getting sad, and getting so angry and offensive, and he actually called Joe Biden based. But everybody stand up and clapped, to protect Kyle Rittenhouse, and I thought that was very, patriotic in the room. I felt that sense of Trumpism, and I liked that about Hood. The after party in the cabin is always fun. I love walking that little bridge at nighttime. The full moon is out. More of those friends. I met a lot of good friends, and that's when we were drinking and carousing till midnight, talking about Evla and esoteric far right stuff from Miguel Serrano to Savitri Devi. Sunday morning, there was no Estonian guy. I remember seeing him speak before, but he wasn't there. He gave a really funny speech, and I like what he's doing. But Sam Dixon is a really great guy, too. and we have a lot in common. And his last speech is always something what to look forward to. And that was yesterday. We dispersed before noon because supposedly there was an Antifa in the crowd taking pictures or something. So I was a little nervous. Also, by the way, for future amren stuff, you can't take a Uber out of the park. There's no reception, so you got to go with someone in the car. And Tiger was luckily to go in his car, and I was able to get back to the Nashville airport, back to Philly, and all that. So I made it safe. But again, for future notices, you can't Uber out of the park, but you can Uber inside of the park. Yes, and all those good guys, I can say goodbye. Now, how do I condense those 3 days, and what is the scene? And maybe this is the most important part instead of doing a full memorization review. Again, going back, the theme here, which I thought was a big surprise, was the return of the American Freedom Party, which had Kevin McDonald and Thomas Sunek. I remember when they first announced it, and Matthew Heimbach was a speaker, and now how fetty he is. It's kind of was like a decade past. They didn't know what they were doing, American Freedom Party. Certainly as much for older people, but they were trying to emulate the nationalist sphere of it. And American Freedom Party has now got as the best replacement of Identity Europa. No longer are we hearing this avant-garde, critical theory, French nouveau droit bullshit, but instead it's back to this Americanism. So in the cabin, instead of seeing Identity Europa flags and esoteric stuff of critical theory, it was more about the Confederate flag, the colonial flag, and just being an American that normies would like. I actually like that. And so another thing too is there's an entire new generation that came into American Renaissance as well. And this new entire generation is kind of aware what happened in 2015, 2017, but starting all over again. You got kids who are 20, 21, or 23, 24, and they all were lurkers in their teen years, seeing all the hilarious drama of Spencer. The scene was totally different in 2017. It was a very crowded Trump train, drug dealing, womanizing, shit posting broadcast stuff, and with Mike Enoch tier. And now you don't have that. The American Renaissance purged all that. And I think the American Freedom Party has instilled that new values. And there's something new that will come across it. It's too hard to tell. Certainly all the hipster racists that made amren kind of objectified it of the Murdoch type. When Murdoch used to make videos about amren saying what's cool is that Tila Tequila shows up and it's all the South Park irony. Well, that's gone. Murdoch is a dead thing now. It's not relevant. It went back to sincerity. So you might have a class of older millennials saying, oh, amren is for old people. It's dumb. It's not as hip anymore. Well, those are just hipster party goers who don't believe in sincere messages. And so amren was able to purge those metal kids. It was able to purge those avant-garde Boyd Rice fans, which I kind of like. It gets back to business CEO tradition of getting the message across back to this Groyper. In other words, the Groyper stuff is happening. That Nick Fuentes does have power over amren, and that he was able to get Michelle Malkin there, but amren also is not exactly Groyperism either. It wants to have a foundational philosophical intellectual thing, which I really admire. Groyperism is still kind of dumb to begin with. And there was no Nazbol Voltex there either. The Marxist types, because that kind of goes the whole critical theory bullshit. So the presence that there was no Arctoast or countercurrents there was very powerful. In Gregory Hood's speech, both F. Roger Devlin and Greg Hood wrote for countercurrents. Gregory Hood says, 25% of people in this country say they're LGBTQ or something on the lines. And what I was getting from Hood is that he was totally against the concept of homo nationalism, totally against the concept of being a gay white nationalist, which, start a little in drama here, I guess that's where Hood separated from Johnson, in that, you can't be, gay and white nationalist, or we don't like this pseudo-gay Richard Simmons gay white nationalist here. which I thought was very interesting. As for Devlin, Devlin is just a patron, and yes, sells book, and his books, just like Hood, just so happens to be published by Countercurrents, but with no apparent Countercurrents or Greg Johnson there, they had a little more freedom. Now, I heard a rumor that Johnson might come to Emra next year, but I kind of doubt it because when Greg Johnson did come to Emra and say in 2018, where Vermin Supreme was outside, Johnson said, "This is the best American Renaissance ever." Well, it's because he's a narcissist and he was there, but certainly, I guess because Johnson was not at 2021, this doesn't make it the best American Renaissance. Not that his power is there to say so. So, in a way, this is kind of the Emren that was forgotten about. I mean, certainly there was an Emren a decade ago where Antifa kicked them out, and then everyone had to go to a hotel and speak in the diner hall. And that was kind of sad. This is kind of the Emren that's post-pandemic, that you had three people who did not show up: David Cole, Colin Flattery, and the Estonian guy, simply because he didn't have a vax. And it's just coincidental. It's only the Ethiopian guy, the Estonian guy that doesn't want to show up here. So, or the Estonian guy didn't want to get a vax, and So I think they were able to make it the best there, and Emren will still continue, and that's a good thing. And Emren plants the seeds for future political movements as well. I was also told by Jared Taylor that American Renaissance is the leading, dissident right voice. And Countercurrents, VDare, and Occidental Observer, they're just little orbiters of all this. And now with the rise of Antelope Press and White Arts Collective, you kind of have this, competitive market happening now. Now, I'm a little worried about White Arts Collective is its Fed stuff, that the fear of putting your name in there and then somebody's making that idiot guy, Jason something, no white guilt. He's in there espousing this kind of pseudo black nationalist message, but it's we was kangs for white people. I think that's actually bad. They're good people, White Arts Collective. It's just the semantics is a little skewed. So I kind of side more with Antelope Press. And Antelope Press is more that avant-garde artsy stuff, but not in your face or anything. It's going back to the funness of young people trying to get in. Because if you're gatekeeping, you choose these people. And I've seen people actually buy some books from Countercurrents, but the books from the kids selling the Countercurrents books, and what they were Jeff Costello, they were Jonathan Bowden, and there was the Dark Knight Rises and all that. And then it's just Greg and his secretive writers. And the problem is that dwarfs the other movements happening here, that there's definitely a shift in the American Renaissance attitude, which is going on. And that whole Nevada countercurrent scene is pathetic. You have old copies of North American New Right and Buttercup Dew staring there as Mark Dial rambles on about Deleuze and Guattari with far right stuff, and Buttercup Dew, and nobody bought a single book there. They probably bought a Jeff Costello's James Bond book, but that's not of interest. People are more interested in the Antelope Press stuff, and hardly any book on Arctos was there either. There was the Oswald Spengler book, and that's a classic. And so with the whole introduction of Michelle Malkin and some of those Groyper crowd, they're more into the action of the American Freedom Party, of wearing a suit and tie, saying the right things, giving these points. The platform is great. And so it's going back to practicality and less about this kind of Patrick Casey, Nazbol Vortex, woke capitalism. Because whenever you do that kind of stuff, it enters into this whole art fag section. And I understand that Sam Dixon understands, and I've met some other CC types who are there, and there are some kids who are younger than me who are into the esoteric, like Miguel Serrano, and it's really nice. I do think it's okay. A big important thing about this MREN at 2021 is that there were no drug dealers here. There was no widely distributed alcohol or cigarette smoking at all. It wasn't a 20-something young kid party. In fact, people brought their kids here. People bought their girlfriends. Everybody here could be passing as a Trump voter, and everything was family friendly. People brought their dogs and kids to the cabin. I did not see that in 2017. So the scene drastically changed to being G-rated and family friendly. In other words, straight edge. They kicked out the drug dealers, the promiscuous idiots, and the hipster racists overnight in the last 4 years. I probably was absent for the last 2 years, but that's what I'm saying. So I remember in 2017, Daniel Freiberg and Jason Giorgiani and Greg Johnson was there. And Freiberg can't come back because he's banned from the country. And Johnson, he was hiding from everyone because he knew he had enemies. Only when the enemies were out next year did he say it was the best amren. Well, those people cause problems. And so everybody puts their distance, and now none of those people are there, and you have to start all over again. You might have the older millennials talking about this Hollywood Nazism and this pseudo-white nationalist, Adam Waffen tier stuff, but there is no verso or zero books type now in this scene. And it's back to the paleo-conservative roots, which is a good thing. Antelope Press could be that, crit theory, zero verso books tier stuff, but it's as every year passes by, you look at countercurrents or Arctos or countercurrents especially, this whole bitching about being a libertarian and going against the Nazbol vortex and all this like be in a cult worship. There's so many idiots. There's this guy named I'm gonna look up his name right now. It just reminds me that people fall into Greg's cult so often that they think a movement is happening, but nothing's really happening whatsoever. There was a guy named Scott Wiesenbold or Kyle Metzger. He's like 20 something and into the shitty SoundCloud rap. He plagiarized me, and he wrote something for Countercurrents on Uncut Gems about worshiping 10 Tricks Point Never as God or something. There was another Mohawk kid, Adon Casil, who was a metal kid. He disappeared completely after that 3 years from 2016, 2018. But I remember he would hang out with Greg Johnson, and he gave him an introduction in North American New Right in that book. And now he's nobody. He's a nobody now. But I'm saying is these hipster homo nationalist kids come and go by the dime a dozen to join Greg's gay cult. So just saying, But anyway, I think they purged it again from those critical theory art fag types. And I was impressed with the young kids there who are really funny, mean well. And when I tell them all these other people like Adon Casil, Michael Bell, or Kyle Mesher, they don't recall. That's a good thing because, just like all the bad Emily Eucases, they get, churned out. Straight edge kicks out the drug dealers, and I see myself as a straight edge gang leader who kicks out those morons. So it's great. It's starting over again, and no countercurrents anymore, no NPI. Let's start again at American Renaissance. There might be some future VDARE in West Virginia in the castle, and there might be some Groyper events, but the Groyper stuff, now Nick Fuentes, he's kind of a gay-eccentric Willows Cardo type. It's probably fun to hang out with those kids, but as long as Michelle Malkin's there, it's all good in the hood. But for us for us types who are more eccentric, I remember I gone on the Nashville airport and I was going back. I met Dave again, and Dave, Dave understands that homo nationalist esoteric current. He's older than me, I hope he got back to his place safely, but he had to sleep in the airport. But we understand that, and we talk about like how Spencer J. Quinn talks to James Lawrence and James Lawrence back and all these bitchy stuff. And we're kind of nostalgic about that motorcycle Boyd Rice subculture. But, we don't want young people to do that because we know it's bad optics and it's all just bullshit in the end. Because if you're an art fag, you might as well be a Marxist. You might as well be Antifa. So, and maybe I should just sum this up and say, other than that, this was a really good event. It was the amren that time forgot, and it's the beginning of the 20s period, the return of something new that maybe the overtone window will of course change. I know it's all this bullshit meta politics. I don't believe in meta politics. I don't really believe in a culture war. It's all co-opted by Silicon Valley elitism. But the whole, white nationalism is a Fed word kind of thing versus the old subcultures. It's kind of becoming new again in the 20s, and I have hope. And I'm just going to be pissed off at these older millennials who are going to be bitching at amren, saying, "Oh, nobody showed up. It's not a party scene anymore." Well, you kids belong in Bushwick, Brooklyn, and Manhattan, and San Francisco. Go be hipsters there with Brittany Venti, right? Go join Shia LaBeouf's The Wall again, right? And so I think that has been purged again. And I think Emran is starting anew, and I'm excited for the next American Renaissance. And now that I have more time and I can be intellectual and a writer, young kids who mean well and want to do good have entered the scene again. And I expect a lot of this to be, you know, I like it. I like all this stuff. So, good Emran. I hope maybe next year or May, and I hope this time I could see Dave Cole next year and Robert Stark. I hope they come again, and then things will happen, and it's a fun hangout scene for sure, for sure. And oh yeah, I just wanted to mention there was a guy at American Freedom Party who told me all the wrongs and rights, what happened, and how the purging. I didn't want to get into details, and I have much more to say. Um, It is. It's also I want to thank Donald Kent. Donald Kent's a great artist, and I really feel like I belong with him. It's a very belonging scene. So hopefully I can see you guys next time in American Renaissance. This is Pilleater, and I record this November the 15th, 2021.